Awesome. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining today. My name is Dan Malik, Senior Director of Product at Ions. Excited to be hosting this week's tech briefing. As a quick refresher for any new folks on the line, the purpose of these 30-minute briefings is for our rotating cast of Ions faculty members to dive into the relevant InfoSec news stories of the week and provide you with specific, actionable guidance to bring back to your teams. With that as a backdrop, thrilled to be joined today by two Ions faculty rock stars, Jessica Hebenstreet and Jake Williams. Jessica, Jake, thanks so much for joining today.
Yeah,
Always,
thanks for having us.
yeah.
All right, let's take a look at today's agenda. First one we're going to talk about was first one we're going to talk about was sort of a maybe under the radar-ish kind of story, a security flaw at Virgin Media that sort of unintentionally, I guess, shared users' locations. We'll dive into that and some implications there. After that, we're going to talk ConnectWise breach that was linked to nation-state hackers, and then finally we will end with Zscaler's acquisition of Red Canary and any sort of implications, takeaways for folks that you should be thinking about on that. So with that, let's get started. Jessica, you want to take the first crack at the Virgin
Yeah.
Media issue? What's going on here?
Yeah. So Virgin Media is a telecom that acquired another one called O2 in about 2021. So what was going on here is that there were misconfigurations on the way the IMS was set up that allowed that leaks sensitive information, including information from the SIM card, geolocation to within about 100 square meters of a cell tower because it was leaking the cell ID. And so the way this was discovered is a security researcher was looking into some of his own issues between a couple phones. And so he did some debugging and was looking at some logs and noticed that the SIP headers were incredibly long. And so after digging into that using some open source tooling, he discovered that he could see, different information from the SIM card and that it was returning the cell ID, which he could then use to kind of geolocate where a caller was. And he tested this with another Virgin Mobile O2 customer, I think in Denmark, and was able to correctly find them within about like I said, 100 square meters area in Copenhagen. So he notified, he tried to do responsible disclosure, notified Virgin Mobile, didn't really receive any response or acknowledgement. So after a couple of months, he posted a blog posting. And suddenly, the very next day, it was announced by Virgin Media that the flaw had been patched, that no end user interaction was needed. And they made the very bold claim that there was no evidence of this being exploited. Um, I find that suspicious. I don't know how they could possibly make that claim, given that it's the logging between two phones that could be captured. And to me, it feels a little bit spy novel, spy movie, right? Because it could have put vulnerable people, like domestic violence victims, journalists, government officials at risk, if they had been able to been located within 100, square meters of where they were just by someone initiating a phone call to their phone. So it's fixed now, apparently, but it had been in place since at least 2021, which is Virgin Mobile acquired O2. But it could have gone back as far as 2017. So, and it was basically because O2 didn't configure the IMS servers appropriately. So, Jake, what do you think about this?
Well, I will assert with high confidence that there are some intelligence agencies spilling some tears over this disclosure,
Yeah.
right? So, while it may be news to us, it may even be news, hopefully news to Virgin Mobile. I don't want to defame them or anything, but hopefully news to them. I'm positive, just I assert with high confidence based on my background, right, that someone was exploiting this. This researcher was not the first to notice, because look, I mean, cell networks, are regularly studied by, of course, by intelligence agencies. That's an interesting part. Obviously, the impact, neat, whatever. I say neat, whatever, like I'm being flippant here because it created real physical security risks for folks. But look, the thing I want to focus on, a couple of things I want to focus on here, right? First off, do not, if you are the victim of a breach, and if you can copy that over into main chat, that'd be fantastic. Do not make stupid statements like there's no evidence that this has been exploited, right? Because people like Kevin will call you on this, because he's like, hey, just FYI, I exploited it, right? And so, he's like, if they tell you no one exploited it, he's like, I did, right? So, bold move. Obviously, nobody from law enforcement's gonna. I'm sure Virgin will have something to say about this, and obviously, nobody from law enforcement is gonna go after Kevin because he'll have exploited it using his burner phones and what have you. But highlighting, right, that those statements are just garbage, right?
Yeah.
Um, we are dealing with another one of those, right? One of the things that we discussed in a tech update, right? Discussed about the fact that there's, the vulnerability no auth, right? Foundational, no auth and no IDC, with audience injection. And folks have been like, no, but there's still no evidence of exploitation. I'm like, we don't log the data that you need to see
Right.
it's been exploited, right? So saying that, right, is it's neat, but it's meaningless, right? Or
Mhm.
even worse, it's either meaningless or intentionally deceptive, right? Here, I'm not going to make a judgment call on which, but yes. The second thing I want to highlight is for the love of goodness, right? It's 2025. You have to have somebody, an actual adult, right, monitoring for vulnerability disclosures and responding to them. There's
Yeah.
I, I abhor the term responsible disclosure because it implies that a researcher who dumps a vulnerability someplace as being irresponsible, by all means, call it coordinated, call it whatever, right? No researcher owes you coordinated disclosure, but you look really, really, really bad, right? And I want to be very clear about that. I'll die on this hill. No researcher owes you coordinated disclosure, right? By the way, one of the great ways, right, if you get one of these in where you're like, oh my gosh, that's going to take us a while to fix. I have consulted with multiple clients that have done this, where you don't bug bounty these people, sign them on as consultants, right? Because then they sign an NDA, right? They're going to help you
Mhm.
fix the vulnerability, right? Maybe they do help you fix whatever. You buy time, right? A lot of time directly. This is not the same as a bug bounty. When you have a bug bounty, if you really need to delay something, right, sign them as a consultant. Um, don't ignore it, right? It's again, particularly for a telco in 2025 to not respond to security researchers saying, I can disclose locations trivially because you screwed up your IMS. That's again just inexcusable. So, anywho, that's my thoughts on this.
Right on. Jessica, any final thoughts on that one before we keep going?
Yeah, so I totally agree with what Jake is saying around disclosure of vulnerabilities. The other thing is, I think that we need to go, back to when we're implementing and configuring and reviewing architectures and designs and configurations. We really need to have that mindset of secure by design, privacy by design, those kinds of things, and that would help mitigate some of these, challenges that we're seeing here.
Yes, yes, and yes. I mean, I again, 2025. I don't understand
Right.
how you start any type of engineering project without considering how you're going to secure it. And again, like even look, I'm in the middle of another dev project now, right? Where I say in the middle of, I guess we're in the starting phases, but whatever. Where everybody wants to take an agile approach. Me too, right? But I've already swatted down a couple of don't worry, we'll fix it laters because I know we don't fix it laters, right?
Yeah.
I know as we iterate, right, you can leave the to do there, right? But until it gets to done, right, it's still a risk, right? And security, sadly, is usually a non-functional requirement, right? And that means
Hmm.
you check the functional requirement boxes, and then folks are doing risk analyses on should we ship it or not. Look, I get startup life, failed startup founder myself here, right? I've been down that road, right? You can run out of runway. It happens. But if you're not in the oh my gosh, right? The company goes under if we don't ship this tomorrow. secure by design from the get-go. And even then, right, you've really got to do some soul searching and say, are these trade-offs I'm making okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right on.
Anywho.
Cool. All right, let's keep moving. ConnectWise, who wants to take the first crack at this one?
Go ahead, Jake.
Oh, okay. So, by all means, I'm going to leave the ConnectWise piece. Do you want to talk about the technicals of this, right? And some of the impact and what have you. It is a really, really interesting vulnerability, but it's an interesting vulnerability class that I'm going to hazard a guess that roughly half the audience probably has never heard of before, right? So if you're not familiar with ASPX and view state, talk to any one of your web app pen testers. Trust me, they are. They at least know it exists, right? And so view state is a hidden variable. And go on to any one of your ASPX pages, do a view source or inspector, and you'll see, basically this view state data being posted back and forth, ultimately to track state within the browser. Now, of course, we know the old adage, right? You don't ever pass sensitive data like, I don't know, executable code. You would never do that and pass that back down to the browser unless you are encrypting it, right? And it turns out ASP takes care of this for you, right? This is on your IIS side of the house, Windows servers side of the house, web servers. And basically here they have a host key that gets set. And that host key, right? Ultimately, and again, that's on your server, right? Is never disclosed. That's ultimately used to encrypt. So while the browser is technically handling extremely sensitive data, it's encrypted by a key that the browser never sees, right? Well, there are hold my beer moments though, right? When you take a template of a given server and the config for it, because again, this can store in the registry and get stored in a bunch of different configuration files for IIS. And you then copy that installation, and suddenly now anybody that has the installation has the key, right? And these should be one-offs, right? And so what happened with ConnectWise is unfortunately exactly that, right? So ConnectWise, as part of their services or as part of one of their servers, ultimately, copies the server with the key, and that key never gets rebuilt during initialization. If you need an easy kind of exemplar, right, of this, imagine for a minute that you built you built a default Linux image that accepted root SSH logins, and all had the same private key, and they were never regenerated. Allows key-based authentication, etc. And those keys never got regenerated upon installation, and then someone leaked the private key. Everybody who used that base image would suddenly be vulnerable, right, to attack, unless they had gone in and, for instance, recycled that key. And to do that, now this is where the analogy falls apart, because I think everybody knows from an SSH perspective, yikes, of course you would want to do that. Don't be using somebody else's pre-built image anyway, but for that scenario. But then you get over to ASP, and this is a spot where it just doesn't come up. It hasn't been discussed a lot. So Jessica, over to you.
Yeah, so I think, this highlights yet another instance in the ongoing saga of remote access tooling being exploited by sophisticated, threat actors, in this case, nation state. And we've talked about this a lot. I mean, everyone here probably knows, my favorite Avanti. They had another thing last week. We're not going to talk about it. But,
You
but
promised to not talk about it, Jessica.
I'm not going into any details, but yeah, Avanti again. But this is yet another example of that. ConnectWise had their own issue about a year ago, a little over a year ago, where they, were exploited kind of similarly. It was a different set of CVEs, but they just did this about a year ago, where a Russian-backed APT group was using this for malicious purposes and breaching the ConnectWise environment. And so I think thanks, Ian. So I think that it continues to underscore the importance of securing these remote access tooling and making sure that our teams are very aware of when vulnerabilities and patches are disclosed and prioritizing those, right? So I think this goes to talk about you know, we often get pushback on, well, patching cadence, and is this really the most important? And how do we do actual prioritization in these environments? We have numerous real world examples of this needing to be a priority, right? And so use these examples to push those conversations forward, right? Because otherwise you're going to be in the situation of having to clean up your entire network and try and making sure that there's no footholds left over and doing incident response when it could have probably been avoided by prioritizing in some kind of emergency patch cycle, if you're out of cycle of getting these things patched. You have to also, I think, really understand what your network traffic looks like, right? And what your like with remote admin and stuff, so that when these things are exploited and these actors are living off the land by using these remote access tools that blend in with other activity, you can recognize, when there's blips in the pattern and go and investigate that a little more closely and look at what's going on. ConnectWise, I think, patched this fairly quickly after the Microsoft vulnerability was disclosed in April, but it obviously wasn't fast enough. So again, prioritizing that and getting that done, and then making sure, if you're a supplier, pushing the urgency to your customers and clients on, no, you really need to patch this. It's a problem kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, a couple of other quick high points here, right? First off, we all know everybody scores 100% on every MITRE ATT eval, right? So I do want to highlight that what Jessica said, is really, really important in light of that, right? The way everybody scores 100% is that they, of course, have alarms for everything, right? You'll never see them, right? Because the vast majority of the living off the land stuff is suppressed down in the informational category, where they are generating tens of thousands of alarms a day in any moderate sized network. And of course, you just aren't dealing with that alert volume. They have to be pushed to the informational category because there are legitimate use cases for the majority of those little bins. Again, there may not be legitimate use cases in your network, right? Your EDR vendor does not know your network, despite all of the AI will learn your network claims. I'm yet to see one that does, like that specifically, right? To promote specific little bin alarms and suppress others. And so long and the short of it here is custom alarms for the win, right? I want to pivot quickly over to the SDLC side. Jessica mentioned, right, that after Microsoft said, hey, and Microsoft did raise the alarm in February, right? About this, Haley's copied that blog post into the end of the chat there. I want to challenge each one of you with a takeaway here. To go back to your teams, right, to your development teams. If you have ASP development, I should mention here. If you don't, meh, whatever. Go back to your teams and ask, right, are you aware of this, right? Because part of SDLC, and it's part that it's not SAST, it's not DAST, so it's not sexy, right? It's not part of our CI/CD. It is security education, right? If you go back to like the Microsoft SDL model, they specifically talk about developer education. And this is not a one-time thing. It has to be continuous, right? Again, pen testers, and I say pen testers, maybe not garden variety, right? But like your red teamer, your bug bountiers have known about this for years. It is not a brand new thing. It's not a particularly common attack class, right? And as a result, it doesn't get wrapped up in a lot of threat models, what have you. Microsoft releases saying, hey, we've noticed an uptick in APTs targeting this. And so everybody be aware. ConnectWise obviously became aware, right? And aware that they have been targeted and some of their customers attacked and whatever. Neat, cool. But look, at the end of the day, right? That's great. Go back to your SDLC teams, your development teams, your security champions, whoever managed your SDLC, and ask, were you aware of this, right? Because this is such a fantastic metric. Folks always ask us again and again, metrics. How do we stack up against other teams? ... There's a date on this blog post, right? When Microsoft literally raised the alarm to the development community and said, if you're using this technology, you got to know about this, right? We're months later, right? Go ask the teams. And that's a great metric. We either did or did not know on this day this was the thing. And if not, don't shame them, right? Step back and say, okay, where do we process fails?
Where do we
Nobody
help?
looking
Yeah.
for this, right? Yeah. And remediate it, right? So
Yeah. And then, so I take that a step further, like either when did we or did we not know about it?
yep,
Right. And then if we did know about it, what actions and how long did those actions take to,
sure.
right? Like
Oh yeah,
we knew
yeah.
about it and then we did what with that information, right?
Fair enough. But I mean, I can't even measure actions we've taken without a did we know about it or not? And I
Oh, absolutely. I'm saying it's the
yeah.
next.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. All good. After we chose this topic, though, I did a quick informal survey of a few clients,
Uh-huh.
and got a 0% hit rate. So
Oh, that's fun.
not great.
So I do tech briefings. Any
Indeed. Yes.
any thoughts
Yes.
on the questions in here? Joe says he has MSP that uses ConnectWise. Should the MSP have informed us? Any thoughts on that? Should they?
What
Would
is
they?
your
Should
what
they
is your
have? I
Should,
contract
mean,
maybe,
say?
would, no?
yeah,
What
I
is
don't
your
like the word
contract
should
say?
because I think I have opinions about should. But did they have a legal obligation to? I think depends on whether they had evidence your data was touched. Working with a lot of breach counsel myself, if there's no evidence one way or the other, and even if they know they wouldn't have the evidence, that's not going to spur a notification in the vast majority of cases,
No
right?
evidence of evidence. Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, exactly,
And
right?
then Jay asked if there's a best practice for managing system images that never stores secrets inside images, but instead places them in external key vaults just to prevent this kind of issue. Any thoughts on that question?
At an app level, absolutely. This just isn't something that IIS is not built this way, right? You have keys upon keys upon keys all over the Windows operating system. And for you to get access to them, you have to be in an administrator or administrator equivalent, at least application administrator or system administrator equivalent group, right? So, it's not considered a security vulnerability necessarily. And again, at the app level, by all means, use a secret store. I mean, understand the trade spaces there because there are some places that may not be always appropriate. But here again, it's just not even possible. Right? So, yeah.
I want to go back to the question about the MSP. So I agree.
Yeah,
It's a, legal, like, what are they going to do? But you as the customer, knowing this information, there's nothing preventing you from going out and saying, hey, we are aware that you use ConnectWise. We are aware that they were breached.
right.
We want more information. Were we impacted? And get an answer there.
Yeah. For what it's worth, too, there's a non-zero chance the MSP has no idea that the ConnectWise incident occurred, right?
Correct.
And as a result, like it's not that they're not disclosing; it's the ConnectWise didn't say anything to them, and then likewise they didn't say anything to you as a result. So, um,
Right
Yeah,
on.
lots of variables.
All right, Jessica, you want to take first crack at Zscaler acquiring Red Canary? What you wanted to talk about this? This was, I think, high up on your list for topics this week.
It
Tell me
was
why.
part of it is because I'm a Red Canary fangirl, so I was kind of like, "Whoa, what what is happening here?" Um, I was a little bit surprised to see this announcement. To be quite honest, it didn't seem to me like a natural um melding of vendors, right? But once I took a step back and started thinking about the security vendor space and how we are seeing, you know, Cisco and Splunk merging, Exabeam and Logarithm, Google's acquiring Wiz, it started to make a little more sense when I started thinking about the movement towards having overall platforms, right? And so I think that Red Canary is going to really benefit from all of the data, right? So I think Red Canary does an excellent job of detection and response. They have really awesome underlying technology. They have amazing analysts. Like I said, I'm a fangirl. Um, and I think that having more of this SSE, network data that they can get from Zscaler is really going to benefit what they already have in place. And so therefore it's a win for customers, right? I also think they're going to benefit from Zscaler's global presence. Red Canary has largely been North America focused. And so I think that they're going to benefit from that as well. On the other side of the coin, I think Zscaler is really going to benefit from better telemetry and better data around identities and endpoints because they've been really focused on the network. And a lot of security programs are um, focusing on more endpoint and more identity as we go, to more of a zero trust model, and network data is being a little bit deprioritized. Now, as someone who has her network forensics certification, it makes me a little sad because I think there's a lot you can do with that network data, but I think melding it together is going to give, gives that better overall picture. And so I'm actually very intrigued by this, and I'm interested to see where it goes. I hope it does not fall into. I hope Red Canary does not get kind of relegated to a traditional MSSP as part of this, though. I'm not a huge fan of traditional MSSPs. In most cases, I think there's a niche use case for them today, but I think largely they were proven ineffective and had trouble demonstrating their value. And so I'm really interested to see, in the next year, after the deal closes, that's the first hurdle, over the next year, 2 years to see how this kind of plays out.
Wow. Yeah, those are fighting words. I now know why you wanted to cover the metadata thing, right? Because if MSSP folks can find your location, right, things are not gonna anyway. Yeah. So alrighty. So a couple of thoughts here, right? First off, this is obvious natural acquisition, right? If you go to ZTNA, like the true, I'm not trying to nurture Scotsman here, right? But you go to the true, ZTNA players, right? It's Fortinet, which has their own EDR. It's Palo, which has their own EDR. I feel dirty saying Fortinet too, given the number of vulnerabilities that then we talk about here. Although again, they have done some work on the SDLC side that makes it feel a little better. But it's Cisco, right? Which again, for lack of, it's not great, right? But they have their own endpoint, their own endpoint suite, right? It's kind of laughable, about as laughable as Fortinet's, right? Whatever. But then you go over to Zscaler, and Zscaler is like, yeah, you got to go somewhere else for that. You want endpoint protection, go
Yeah.
somewhere else. There's no, and this take they're because there's no platform play, it takes them out of a huge chunk of the mid market, right? Where like top end of the market, nobody cares, right? Go buy best in breed for everything. We'll figure out how to stitch it all together. But that mid market, that small medium enterprise, and that 2,500 to 10,000 range, while Red Canary doesn't have their own EDR, they process data from practically all the big players, including Defender, right? And
Hmm.
so natural acquisition for me. I'm a big Red Canary fanboy too. I used, full disclosure, right? One of my companies used to be a former companies, or used to be a Red Canary partner. And so, I know the CEO, one of the founders, right? He's rock solid team they put together.
Yeah.
And so I, like any acquisition, I'm always concerned about how the acquisition will continue to be funded, down the road. The other thing that never happens with an acquisition is the price goes down, right? So the price for services, I can't think of a time when I've been paying for a given service, the company gets acquired, and my renewal price is less than it was before, right?
Good news. You're
I,
gonna drop your
yeah,
price.
yeah. It's always the thing that always happens is it always goes up, right? And then they try and tell me like, hey, this thing that you didn't ask for, that's from the original company, we bundled it, so you're getting more value, right? But anyway, and so yes, stand by to stand by. We'll see in a year how this all, or 2 years really, by the time this is all said and done, how it all plays out. Because acquisition, then they're obviously going to do cuts, and then we'll see from there. So
Yeah.
Right.
yeah,
Cool. I did see a question about a bug bounty in the chat for Jake, but that might be an A-year poll question. I would say
yeah,
because
it's,
you'll
we don't have
get
enough
some
time
good
here.
answers in a poll. I think on that one
Yeah.
for sure.
Yep.
So definitely do that. One final thing, I just wanted to put a note out here for the CISO comp and budget survey, specifically here the staff comp and career survey. Just a call to take. I think pretty much all the attendees on here could take that survey. Um, You'll get access to real-time data, benchmarking, all this good stuff, plus all the reports that we build on top of it. So just kind of wanted to give one final call out there to take the survey here if you have time. It's pretty quick, and yeah, you'll get some good data and reports out of it. So with that, let's wrap for the day. Jessica, Jake, great stuff
Thanks.
as always. Really appreciate your time, and definitely do this again soon.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Thanks
Cool.
very much.
All
Yeah.
right.
See ya.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.